There are parasites that steal blood, parasites that eat flesh, and then there are the ones we're lucky that don't exist. Imagine that you fall asleep and you feel something crawling up your spine, but by the time you realize it, it's too late. Today I'm bringing that nightmare to life and turning it into a Halloween prop. This is the Spine Leech. Yes, the Spine Leech. I had so much trouble with this sculpt, and I will show you what I had trouble with when it came to this sculpt. But right now, just building up an armature. So for the armature, I'm using like a giant styrofoam ball, which is going to be its big sack, and then I used a lot of loose wood. That ended up biting me right in the butt because there were voids just inside the armature where the clay kept sliding off and cracking because the armature support wasn't very good. I should have wrapped it in like chicken wire or bulked it out with tinfoil so the clay couldn't collapse in on itself. And at one point I had to cut the entire side off this thing, fill it with spray foam, then that spray foam ended up expanding too much and I had to resculpt a lot of the detail. And then the head, I had issues with the head, but you know what? I'll get into that later once we get there. Because right now, I'm just trying to bulk up and get kind of like a feel for what I want to go for. I'm thinking like a slug mixed with a mosquito. It's coming together. Still not sure about the head, front area, I should say. I also might need to cut out some 2x4 and put it underneath the table so it don't collapse on me. I don't know if it needs to be bigger at the front and it thins out at the top. Almost like a slug or centipede. It's definitely more slug-like. I was worrying that this table was going to collapse because it's just one of those crappy little folding plastic tables. And, I should have had the foresight to think about like reinforcing the table, like putting plywood under it, like I said, because I ended up using a lot of clay and the table was bending. And because that was happening, that also caused some of the clay to crack on me. And because this is pottery clay, it's just your basic standard pottery clay you can get from any pottery store. It's not wet clay, WED, which is also a water-based clay, which has glycerin in it, which helps it, stay firmer together, doesn't really crack much, or I should say at all. With pottery clay, it can dry out really fast. So I learned a really valuable lesson when making this thing. I wanted this creature to have some type of sucker, so I was kind of playing around where I wanted to put it. But I knew it was going to have like a big old long sucker, like a mosquito, crawls up your spine. You can't feel it because it lays down like a paralyzing agent in its slime, and then it sticks into you, drinking up all your spinal fluid. And when looking at slugs, they're pretty smooth, but I didn't want it to have just like a smooth body. I wanted to have some like roly-poliness to it, kind of like some fat, and to also exaggerate how chunky and heavy this thing is. I learned a lot while sculpting this dude, and I just want to say armature is key to any sculpture. I have tried to cut corners on armatures because it's my least favorite thing to create. And with this thing, it really bit me in the ass. We're talking clay falling off, clay cracking, literally the clay just kind of pushing inwards because there's voids in it and falling off. Using pottery clay. I know a lot of artists use pottery clay making props like this, Halloween props, horror props, because it's cheap. I've only used pottery clay a handful of times, so I'm not super used to it and knowing how it acts. If I was using oil-based clay, I wouldn't have had that issue, but it also would have took longer to make this. If I was using wet clay, I probably wouldn't have had to deal with the cracks. But if I would have built a proper armature instead of trying to cut corners, I probably wouldn't have had any issues. Though I did encounter some other issues, but I'll talk about that in a little bit. Probably plump up this side. His little snail fins. I'm not sure what you call that. Snail fins? I'm trying to get this body all smoothed out and looking somewhat good. Sometimes you gotta get in there with your finger. Some parts I'll use a brush because you can't get in there with a sponge. Well, in pottery, you'd be hollowing it out, right? And firing this. We do in the prop building community is we make molds, right? If we pack the clay and it hardens and we sculpt on top of that, there's still gonna be enough room to clear out that hard clay because it's not gonna be stuck in the mold. it'd just be in the clay. Then we pull that out, and then we'd pull the clay out, and then we'd have our mold, you know? One of my favorite ways to make wrinkles and things like that is using saran wrap and a tool so that the edges aren't so harsh. They're more rounded out and they look more natural. I didn't have any saran wrap, so I ended up using the bag the clay came in. And, you know, it worked for what I wanted it to do. And when I'm doing this, the clay is actually pretty soft. When you're doing this kind of detail, you want the clay to be a bit stiffer and harder, especially if it's water-based clay, or else it's just going to be a mess. I had to cut this open on this side and destroy a lot of detail and fill it with foam because it was collapsing inwards. And here's what I mean. As you can see, I put in the spray foam into where all the voids are, and then you see some cracks there. This expanded and it created a huge mess. So many cracks just going all over the sculpture. And let me tell you, I had to do a lot of reworking on this thing. Had to fix the cracks with more clay, but even then the cracks kept kind of like popping up because the clay was just over the surface of the cracks, and it kept happening because I think the foam was still expanding at the time. So then I had to go back in and cut some foam out and then reclay it up and then redo the textures and stuff, and it was just a mess, man. And again, I think I learned my lesson. Armatures are very important. Okay, don't make the same mistake I did. I wanted this creature to make sense, and in doing that, I wanted it to have a way where the head could come out and go down in order to, you know, suck the spinal fluid out of people. So I decided to put these kind of like flaps on the front. So you can imagine like the head extending and then folding downwards. Without that, then it wouldn't have made any sense for the head to go down, well, at least in my mind. So you can imagine the head extending up and then moving down, and then those flaps are kind of like opening up and giving room for that head neck area to move down to be able to suck the spinal fluid out of people. Another idea I wanted to give and try out was adding kind of like a defense mechanism, kind of like pustules on this thing. If it gets frightened or you try and pull it off somebody or something, then these things will activate and explode, causing severe burns or acid burns. I think I'm gonna cut the head off. I want to make it a bit bigger, like elongate, so it has kind of like almost like a neck. So I have the option in the future, if I want to make it into an animatronic, that like the head will like pop up the jump scare instead of just being like a regular stationary prop. So I just gotta bite the bullet and cut the head off. Okay, that went as well as it probably could have. With the head cut off, I just fill it in with that hole in with clay and flatten it out because we're gonna extend the neck or neck of this creature to be longer. So then we can slide it into there. And also it gives me an option later on if I want to make this into an animatronic where the head pops up and scares people. The head, oh God, this was a huge pain in my butt. Essentially, what happened is things just kind of fell apart because, again, the armature wasn't correct, or there wasn't enough bulk out of the armature. This clay just did not want to stay together. Just kept sliding down the pole I was using, so I ended up using more spray foam, trying, you know, stop it from sliding down, zip ties so I had something to grab onto, but eventually it just all fell apart. And I said, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to resculpt the whole thing and build a better armature for it. Oh, I can't believe I have to rebuild the whole thing. It fell apart because literally the clay slid off the armature, so I had to back it with foam and cut the foam out, and it was a whole thing. So now I gotta figure out how I want to approach fixing this guy because he's just falling apart, bro. There's things I liked with the old head, but there's also things I did not like about it. So I was able to take the things I like, kind of rework it to make it better. Now this looks very phallic, as you can see, but ended up doing a lot of detail to the face and the head. Unfortunately, the video and the footage for that, I'm not sure what happened to it. I decided to put like this weird vagina mouth on it, with like 6 eyes, and just make it really fleshy in the front. I feel like H.R. Giger would be very proud of this one, especially with all the phallicness on it. And it's done! Look at that! I know, why is it orange? You're probably wondering. Well, I base coated it, so I prepped it for painting, and I wanted to go a different route with the colors, so it's gonna be a lot of oranges, yellow, blues, and whites, and some black. So that's why it's orange. You know, it looks very pumpkin-y. So what I didn't end up showing you guys is the molding process. Made a giant mold for this guy. Filled the mold up with liquid latex, let that sit for about an hour, poured it out and drained it, filled it with foam. Unfortunately, for this one, it looks a little wonky, as you can tell, like here. Not very rolly, and it's very kind of like, you know, it's missing a lot of its foam, because they ended up sending me a really rigid foam when it said it was flex foam, which is like a really squishy foam, which is what I wanted. So when I filled it up and it cured, well, then this foam is super hard, but it's also brittle and grainy and gross. So I couldn't get it out of the mold. I literally had to carve out a bunch of foam just to be able to pull it out of the mold. And then I just kind of bulked it up with paper. I had a lot of issues with this one. And then I ended up sculpting the little sucker later on. And then I was able to glue it into the little area there. So even though it has the foam I don't want in it and it's really wonky, I also had to cut it open here and there to fill it with more foam because there's nothing there because that foam didn't fill that void. So I had to cut it open, fill it with some foam to bulk that up more. So it's not the nicest looking one. The next one I make is going to be better. So I'm using this one just to figure out the color scheme. Once I figure out the color scheme, then I can start producing more and put them up on my website. But yeah, there we go. The Spine Leech, very phallic. You know, I had a lot of issues, but at the same time, I learned a lot by sculpting this thing. And that's very important, because not everything is going to go right for you. And when things do go wrong, you just got to adapt to it. You know, yeah, you might get frustrated with it, might want the world to end, but you just have to push through and just get to that end result. And the end result of the sculpture, I'm pretty happy with. But to really bring it to life, we're gonna have to paint this thing. But that is gonna be for another video. But there you go, that's the Spine Leech. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to follow, hit that like button, and as always, I'll see you all in the next video.